Department of BA English Guru Nanak College commemorates the National Book Month, October 2022. We invite participants from far and wide to attempt this e-quiz and benefit from the experience of this knowledge sharing. Each October, National Book Month allows us to celebrate and expand our love of reading. With a spark to research on the evolution of books and reading, Alberto Manguel's History of Reading was introduced. It is a book by itself speaking about book reading. The facts and illustrations from the book unfolds gripping insights to avid readers about the evolution of books we hold so dearly in our hands in pursuit of knowledge and for the pure pleasure of reading. This audiovisual presentation is an exposition of a few facts from this book. Its chief focus is to take the audience through the history of reading and books. Secondly, to kindle interest in the activity of reading, which is in gradual decline. Reading begins with the eyes. The keenest of our senses is the sense of sight, wrote Cicero. St. Augustine has praised it as world's point of entry. St. Thomas Aquinas called sight the greatest of the senses through which we acquire knowledge, and it is obvious to any reader. The media of reading involved clay tablets, stone inscriptions, papyrus, palm leaf, parchment or vellum, both made from skins of animals. Then we have the modern print followed by electronic devices for reading. Act of reading establishes an intimate physical relationship in which all the senses have a part. The eyes drawing the words from the page, the ears echoing sounds being read, the nose inhaling the familiar scent of paper, glue, ink, cardboard or leather, the touch caressing the rough or soft page, the smooth or hard binding, even the taste at times when the reader's fingers are lifted to the tongue, which is how the murderer poisons his victims in Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose. Written words from the days of the first Sumerian tablets were meant to be pronounced out loud. The letters composed in ancient writing scrolls were not separated but were strung together in continuous sentences. Because the ancient people believed that letters were for reading aloud and the audience would only listen to it, and medieval texts repeatedly call upon the audience to lend ears to a tale. The classic phrase verba volant, scripta manent meant that what is written remains, what is spoken vanishes into air, but it used to express the exact opposite. It was coined in praise of the word said out loud, which has wings and can fly, as compared to the silent word on the page, which is motionless and dead. Reading out loud was the norm from the beginnings of the written word. The reader had a duty to lend voice to the silent letters. Silent reading was looked with bewilderment. Alexander the Great read a letter from his mother in silence in the 4th century BC to the bewilderment of his soldiers. And Julius Caesar, standing next to his opponent Cato in the Senate in 63 BC, silently read a little billet doux sent to him by Cato's own sister. even though instances of silent reading can be traced to earlier dates. Not until the 10th century does the manner of silent reading become usual in the West. The ancient writing on scrolls, which neither separated words nor made a distinction between lowercase and uppercase letters, nor used punctuation, served the purposes of someone accustomed to reading aloud, someone who would allow the ear to disentangle what to the eye seemed a continuous string of signs. But this did not effect much in disentangling the clusters. In order to help those whose reading skills were poor, the monks in the scriptorium made use of a writing method known as percola et comata, in which the text was divided into lines of sense, a primitive form of punctuation that helped the unsteady reader lower or raise the voice at the end of a block of thought. Punctuation remained unreliable, but these early devices no doubt assisted the progress of silent reading. Saint Isaac of Syria and the theologian Isidore were sufficiently familiar with silent reading to be able to praise it as an effective method. They pioneered in explaining the benefits of silent reading. American psychologist Julian Jaynes, in a controversial study on the origin of consciousness, argued that the bicameral mind, in which one of the hemispheres becomes specialized in silent reading, is a late development in humankind's evolution, and that the process by which this function develops is still changing. And thus, in the course of time, the benefits of silent reading was enumerated as follows. By silent reading, the reader was able to establish an unrestricted relationship with the book and the words. The words need not be pronounced. The ideas could be retained for further inspection by the reader. The reader had time to consider and reconsider the precious words whose sounds he could just echo within. The text became the reader's own possession, the reader's intimate knowledge, whether in the busy scriptorium, the marketplace, or the home. According to De Fonneville, reading books enriched the present and actualized the past. Memory prolonged these qualities into the future. For De Fonneville, the book, not the reader, preserved and passed on memory. For Socrates, books were aids to memory and knowledge, but true scholars were to do without them. Ironically, a few years later, his disciples Plato and Xenophon recorded his disparaging opinion of books in a book, and the memory of his memory was thereby preserved for us, his future readers. In De Fonneville's days, students commonly used books as memory aids, setting the open pages in front of them in class, usually one copy for several students, which is also practiced till date in our classroom. Reading is writing's apotheosis. The inventor of the first written tablets may have realized the advantage these pieces of clay had over the holding memory in the brain. First, the amount of information storable on tablets was endless. One could go on producing many tablets while the brain's remembering capacity is limited. Second, tablets did not require the presence of the memory holder to retrieve information. But writing is not the only invention that came to life in the instant of that first incision. One other creation took place at the same time. Simultaneously, it created a reader. Writing required a reader. The existence of the text is a silent existence, silent until the moment in which a reader reads it. Only when the able eye makes contact with the markings on the written text does the text come to active life. All writing depends on the generosity of the reader, and through writing, the written text rose to infinitum, which paved way to the installation of library. For Aristotle, collecting books was part of the scholar's labor, necessary in the way of memoranda. The library of the city founded by his disciple was simply to be a vaster version of this, the memory of the world. According to Strabo, Aristotle's collection of books was passed on to Theophrastus, from him to his relative and pupil Nellius of Skepsis, and from Nellius it finally reached Ptolemy II, who acquired it for Alexandria. By royal decree, all ships stopping at Alexandria had to surrender any book they were carrying. These books were copied and the originals were returned to their owners while the duplicates were kept in the library. The established text of the great Greek dramatists, stored in Athens for actors to transcribe and study, were borrowed by Ptolemies through the good offices of their ambassadors and copied with great care. Callimachus was an ancient Greek poet, scholar, and librarian who was active in Alexandria during the 3rd century BC. Callimachus divided the library into shelves or tables, pinakoi, arranged in 8 classes or subjects: drama, oratory, lyric, poetry, legislation, medicine, history, philosophy, and miscellany. He separated the longer works by having them copied into several shorter sections called books, so as to have smaller rolls that would be more practical to handle. To Callimachus, we also owe a cataloging device that was to become commonplace, the custom of arranging volumes in alphabetical order. Before that time, only a few Greek inscriptions listing series of names make use of alphabetical order. With Callimachus, the library became an organized reading space. Privilege of reading. In Heian, Japan, as in ancient Greece, in Islam, in post-Vedic India, and so many other societies, women were excluded from reading. For centuries, Afro-American slaves learned to read against extraordinary odds, risking their lives in a process because of the difficulties set in their way. Slaves who wanted to be literate were forced to find devious methods of learning, either from other slaves or from sympathetic white teachers, or by inventing devices that allowed them to study unobserved. As centuries of dictators have known, an illiterate crowd is easiest to rule, since the craft of reading cannot be untaught once it has been acquired. The second best recourse is to limit its scope. Therefore, like no other human creation, books have been the bane of dictatorships. Works of Protagoras were burnt in 411 BC in Athens. In the year 213 BC, the Chinese Emperor Shi Huangdi tried to put an end to reading by burning all the books in his realm. In 168 BC, the Jewish library in Jerusalem was deliberately destroyed during the Maccabean uprising. In the 1st century AD, Augustus exiled the poets Cornelius, Gallus, and Ovid and banned their works. The Emperor Caligula ordered that all books by Homer, Virgil, and Livy be burned. In 303, Diocletian condemned all Christian books to the fire, and these were only the beginning. Thomas Johnson, a slave who later became a well known missionary preacher in England, explained that he had learned to read by studying the letters in a Bible he had stolen, since his master read aloud a chapter from the New Testament every night. Johnson would coax him to read the same chapter over and over until he knew it by heart and was able to find the same words on the printed page. The American writer Frederick Douglass, who was born into slavery and became one of the most eloquent abolitionists of his day, as well as founder of several political journals, recalled in his autobiography, "The frequent hearing of my mistress reading the Bible aloud awakened my curiosity in respect to this mystery of reading and roused in me the desire to learn." A reader's extraordinary relief, emblematic glasses. It is bewildering to imagine the many centuries before the invention of glasses, during which readers squinted their way through the nebulous outlines of a text. And moving to imagine the extraordinary relief, once glasses were available, at suddenly seeing, almost without effort, a page of writing. A sixth of all humankind is myopic. Among readers, the proportion is much higher, closer to 24%. Aristotle, Luther, Keats, Tennyson, Dr. Johnson, Alexander Pope, Quevedo, Wordsworth, Dane Gabriel Rossetti, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Kipling, Edward Lear, Rabindranath Tagore, James Joyce, all had impaired sight. The strain on the eyes of medieval readers was great. Then, sometime late in the 13th century, the fate of the poor sighted reader changed. Nothing is known of this remarkable inventor. Perhaps he was a monk named Spina, of whom it was said that he made glasses and freely taught the art to others. Until well into the 15th century, reading glasses were a luxury. They were expensive, and comparatively few people needed them, since books themselves were in the possession of a select few. After the invention of the printing press and the relative popularization of books, the demand for eyeglasses increased. In England, for instance, peddlers traveling from town to town sold cheap continental spectacles. Criticisms. You are daydreaming because a voracious reader's inactivities seem to be a wasteful idleness and a sin against the joy of living. Slothful, feeble, pretentious, pedantic, elitist. These are some of the epithets that eventually became associated with the absent-minded scholar, the poor-sighted reader, the bookworm, the nerd, buried in books, isolated from the world of facts and flesh, feeling superior to those unfamiliar with the words preserved between the dusty covers. The bespectacled reader who pretended to know what God in his wisdom had hidden was seen as a fool, and the glasses became emblematic of intellectual arrogance. And this is how these nerds find reading as a pleasure. Reading opens many worlds. It is the destination and the journey. It helps one read new things and test one's own understanding. Readers find treasures in books. They are identified as intellects. The mere possession of books implies social standing and a certain intellectual richness. A background of bookshelves adds a touch of intelligence. It is recorded that Alexander clutched a copy of Iliad before his death. Napoleon Bonaparte was a voracious reader, and many personalities who set a global benchmark were insightful readers. My travel through the book, The History of Reading, has made me to conclude with a note that a reader of book is a reader of life. So resolve and pick a book and embrace the best experiences of life. I am profoundly thankful to the Academic Council of my institution for giving me this opportunity and Mr. Balarmati for introducing this book to me at the needed time.